We have the next question coming from Sophie Mkwena, and she is the foreign editor of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. She has two questions. How many African countries are participating in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine? That's the first one. Then the second one, which countries are participating in the vaccine trials, and how are you going to deal with the negative perceptions against vaccine trials on the continent, where some feel that Africa is always being used as a testing ground for vaccines?
First of all, in terms of vaccine development on the continent, we have a clear position on that. And I would step back and say that we want to be sure that Africa exercises leadership in the development and access to COVID-19 vaccines, and not just be a spectator or a passive receiver of products from outside of the continent. And because of that, I'm pleased to state here that the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, will be convening a meeting on June 24th and 25th, an international conference on vaccine development in Africa. And it's titled Africa's Leadership in Vaccine Development and Access to COVID-19. And we'll bring all the minds, the best minds in Africa, as part of the continental strategy to develop a framework of what we should have as a continent to be active participants in vaccine development. That meeting on the 24th will cover three areas. One would actually look at issues related to research and development for vaccines on the continent. And believe me, let me say this and make it look like it's simple, which is not, but developing a vaccine is not so difficult. I'm a virologist. All you need to know is the sequences of the virus. Then from there, you develop your messenger RNA, and then you start playing with it to express it in vectors and either produce proteins. The key question is, would that vaccine product go through the entire spectrum? That is from the concept and it goes to animal studies to where you really put it in humans. I think that is it. And knowing the continent, there are so many groups on the continent that have that capacity to develop vaccines. They are not just enabled, but it's financially enabled and resourced appropriately to do that. So that meeting the chairperson will convene will be dealing with those kind of aspects there. Very, very important. The second thing that the meeting will address is, what if there's a vaccine today? So we'll deal with issues of access and equity of the vaccine, a potential COVID vaccine. We know that several candidate vaccines are under trial in China, in Europe, and the United States. So if there's a vaccine today that is found to be safe and efficacious, how do we as a continent access that? And then the last thing that the meeting will discuss is issues related to community and civil society engagement. Even if a vaccine is water, that you can open the tap and get it, you still need to be distributed. And there are issues of who gets it first. How is it distributed in a vulnerable population? And so that discussion has to occur now. With respect to the continent's capacity, I mean, as I've said, this is not the first time that Africans and African institutions are taking part in vaccine development. Okay, we should not be, I've always said, let's not be afraid of COVID. We have to confront COVID with the expertise that we know from the past. African scientists have been at the front line of conducting vaccine trials in the DRC. Okay, the current Ebola outbreak in DRC has the leadership of Professor Muyembe driving vaccine clinical trials. He's also driving, he has also driven trials for other molecules, other monoclonal antibodies that were found to be very effective in controlling the virus. When the Ebola outbreak occurred in West Africa, Africans were at the forefront of conducting trials, or vaccine trials there. Africans have conducted large-scale malaria trials on the continent, and many other. Myself, I've taken part in trials of short course zidovudine, or that is a molecule that You provide antiretroviral, you provide to pregnant women who are infected with HIV to reduce transmission. Did that many years ago. So without Africans participating actively in vaccine trials and other research trials, we will be left behind. I just want to be sure that we have the capacity to do that, we have the capability to do that, we just need the resources and a framework to do that, which the African Union Commission and Africa CDC, under the leadership of Chairperson Musa Faki, will be elaborating in course of the week.